Hello, everybody. So I reran my valuations on insurance stocks because I wanted to add OSCR to the mix. And I was initially very excited with OSCR's numbers, with enterprise value over gross profit over revenue growth of 0.05, rule of 40 of 25, but that could go up as the EBITDA margin gets on its way up and operating leverage kicks in. Revenue growth is decent to good, actually, at 24%. I was very pleased with what I saw, but there is a catch. There is a big catch, which makes it way too risky for me to touch, and I'll get to that in a second. Briefly, let me comment on the other stocks. Root Insurance. I made this video on Root Insurance. Of course, the car insurance business is too anecdotal for me. I don't want to be in this business. It's too small of a business. But if one has to be in the car insurance business, I was actually fairly positive about Root in this video. And feel free to watch it. It was 10 days ago, my 20-minute deep dive on Root. Lemonade, I've never analyzed. I've never done a deep dive on Lemonade, mostly because the EBITDA margin is negative. How much operating leverage do you need to even get to break even? Plus, I think there is a risk with home insurance, house insurance. I think you could have a risk, especially when we have, for example, fires popping up now in Long Island or something like that. So and I still remember the days where they lost a lot of money on the Texas freeze. So that's why I'm a little wary on Lemonade. I'll analyze it again at some point. The stock that I want to analyze today is OSCR, because OSCR on paper looks very interesting until you find out the red flag about the ACA, which I'll get into that. But if you look at just enterprise value to next year sales, it's trading at 0.2x, right? 0.19x. So dirt cheap. This is why it gets to a 0.05 in enterprise value over gross profit or revenue growth. Productivity per employee is awesome, outstanding at 3.8 million per employee, but there is a red flag, and I'll get to that. So let me get started with OSCR. Tell you about OSCR. As of December 21st, we have 1.7 million. We actually have 1.8 million members. Revenue 9 billion, 9.2, rounding it up. 18 states where they operate. Medical loss ratio is 81.7%. If you look at the call, it's actually up slightly year over year, their medical loss ratio. So people are using their health insurance benefits. Their mission is to make healthcare, to make a healthier life, but that's what I mean, healthcare, accessible and affordable. And you probably know where this is going. This is because OSCR is a top affordable Care Act provider, formerly it was never officially named that, but it was people used to call Obamacare. They're a top provider on the ACA marketplace, for Obamacare marketplace, and they're growing very fast on that marketplace, and they're getting a lot of business from that marketplace. And if you know who is in power in the United States right now, you understand why I am concerned about the revenue growth of this company. But anyways, before we get to that, let's continue. They have a nice net promoter score of 66, which is actually not nearly as high as many customer-centric companies I follow, but for health insurance companies, from what I understand, that's through the roof. People seem to be very happy about the service. They actually have a 7% market share on the Affordable Care Act marketplace. They use technology to provide healthcare in a cheaper way. For example, they have virtual urgent care, virtual doctors. They are innovative in the way they select their providers. And talking about the growth, so they give us some sort of a 2027 guidance on the market, saying the market is 10 million is the potential number of customers they're eligible to get today. They're hoping to sell to enterprise. The market expansion is them trying to sell to a enterprise, and there's potentially other states they could add to, but that would be another potential 6 million lives total. Remember, they have 1.8 million lives that they sell to today. And then you also have the enhanced subsidies upside, if there is enhanced subsidies, if they are continued by the new administration, which they likely won't, is my take on this. So if you don't know about the ACA, I learned a thing or two today. The ACA It's pretty much the lower your income, the more compelling the Affordable Care Act gets. Because if you make less than $23,000 a year, so 150% of the federal poverty line, with the subsidies, and these subsidies were passed by the former administration, with the subsidies, you pay zero. You get your entire premium entirely covered. And you can see for the same ACA insurance, and they define the plans, and these plans are specific requirements, but the same insurance, if you make $68,000, costs you $465, and you can see that the subsidy essentially doesn't matter for medium level income. Like if you make $68K a year, the subsidy essentially doesn't matter to you, because without the subsidy it's going to be $477. With the subsidy it's going to be $465 a month, so that doesn't really matter. But the lower money you make, the more subsidies is substantial, because you would pay $75 a month without the subsidy, $0 a month with the subsidy. And if you're confused by these numbers, you're like, oh, wait a minute, $38,253, that's very cheap, right? Why isn't it $477? Why don't they pay the full cost? That's because the way the ACA is set up, the less you make, the less the insurance company has to charge as a share of your income. You pay as a share of your income. And so that's the ACA Care Act in a nutshell. And I think OSCR Health knows that it's at risk, because if you look at the investor presentation, they spend a lot of time telling you about how they're going to try to attract employers, and they even have case studies to try to get employers to pay for OSCR for their employees and pick OSCR as the healthcare provider for their employees, as opposed to the more traditional insurance companies, because I think they know that this is at risk. And in my view, this is at risk because when I look at the call, when I read the call, of course, the first comment of the CEO, I will cover key business highlights. The first one is, OSCR is one of the largest SCA carriers following the 2025 open enrollment period of the SCA, one of the top ACA carriers. So this was April 2024, they had 1.5 million. They now, in February 2024, have 1.8 million members out of the 24 million people in the US who have an ACA insurance. They offer 1.8 million of those. They carry 1.8 million of those, and the market share is slightly up. They're probably at close to 8% ACA market share right now. The point of this calculation, 24 lives times 7% equals 1.7 million. They have 1.8 million, which is why I think they're about 8% market share now. The point is, this business is 95% plus dependent. It's 95% plus dependent on the Affordable Care Act. And so hopefully nothing happens to the Affordable Care Act. Now, the market, of course, is smelling something, which is why the stock is down 20% roughly since the election. A little less than that if I took November 4, but roughly down 20% since the election, because the market is fearful that something is going to happen to the ACA. You can see the performance of the stock in 2023, 2024, during the prior administration. That performance was actually pretty darn outstanding. This stock, no doubt, would have gone a different way if the election had gone a different way. And here's my conclusion. Let me go back to their market opportunity, is what happens to the revenue growth if the ACA subsidies end. And I think there is a lack of consensus as to whether Trump is going to replace Obamacare. I mean, we know that was one of his big intent in the first mandate, in the first 4 years. But there seems to be a consensus as to what's going to happen to the extra subsidies that Biden had added, and a lot of people are thinking these extra subsidies are going to go away. And if these extra subsidies go away, what that means is that the extra 4 million lives of marketplace opportunity that they could have gone after, well, that's going to go away. And that's per the estimate of OSCR themselves. 2025 enhanced subsidies upside if it's not there, the 4 million increase is not there. But the question is, what is going to happen to even the 10 million lives in 2024 that OSCR has access to, their footprint, the 18 states? What's even going to happen to those if the ACA subsidies ends? Because if I go back to my ACA chart, you can see, so like I said, the subsidies don't really matter if you are, let's say if you make more than $50,000 a year and you want to get ACA, the subsidies don't really matter to you. But if you make $23,000, $75 a month, that could be not something you want to pay, and people just don't get insurance. And those subsidies, actually, the lower money you make, the more these subsidies matter, and these subsidies are at risk. And let me give credit to credit is due to this article, which is Health Policy Research, Polling and News, KFF, Cynthia Cox. You can see what she is saying right there. So what's going to happen if it expires in late 25? And he voted these until, I believe, September 2025, or the end of 2025. That was some of the things that the prior administration was trying to vote in pretty quick. The odds are that they would not be renewed. And if they are not renewed, well, that's going to be a major drop in the size of the program. Because, right now, okay, in 2025, they say 22.8 million people have ACA. So it's 23 million, let's call it. So we have 23 million people. It could drop by the end of 26 to 19 million people, and it could drop by 2030 to 15 million people if the ACA subsidies end like they are rumored or expected to end. And the reason why I think a lot of people think they're going to end is because those subsidies would be an extra cost of $335 billion over a 10-year period. And of course, what is the current administration trying to do? They're trying to cut costs. And what do you think is going to happen to $338 billion of ACA extra subsidies? Well, the odds are they're not going to stay, or at least that's not a risk that I'm willing to take. I think ACA is going to stay, but I think the subsidies are not going to stay. And if the subsidies don't stay, it's not a rocket science to figure out the direction of the stock, because you're going to move from 23 million potential eligible customers to 19 million to as low as 15 million, because most of the lower income ACA recipients are just not going to do it, and they're just not going to get insurance because the subsidy is gone. And that's too bad, because that's most of the business of OSCR Health. So in a nutshell, I love the valuation, but this valuation comes with a huge red flag in my view and a huge risk. And unless you have an intuition that the subsidies are going to stay, which I definitely don't, but unless you think the subsidies are going to stay, I personally will stay away from this stock, because I think the subsidies are going away. So this was not investment advice. This was not financial advice. I am disappointed that I don't like OSCR. This is just entertainment. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.